Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a really fascinating, honestly, quite tangled web today. The complex relationship between international law, raw political power, and territorial occupations. We're going to clear away all that geopolitical noise and look at exactly what happens when the gavel finally falls on the global stage.
So think about this for a second. If an international court declares a territorial occupation illegal, why does it just keep going? On the ground, the realities are incredibly harsh, right? We see displaced communities, homes destroyed, and meticulously documented human rights violations. Yet, when a court actually steps up and rules these actions illegal, the occupation often just continues. So, what's the deal here? Can these courts actually halt an occupation? Or do they really just exist to point out what's legal and what's not?
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap to solving this legal mystery today. We'll start with the core legal paradox. Then we'll define territorial occupation, look at the international courts, tackle the enforcement problem, and finally cover why court rulings matter. Section 1. The core legal paradox, the massive gap between our expectations of global justice and the reality on the ground. Section 2. Defining territorial occupation. Because to really understand the courts, we first have to objectively define the law governing the land itself.
You see, there's this huge disconnect between what we expect global justice to look like and the gritty, day-to-day reality. To wrap our heads around this paradox, we have to look at the clinical, legal definition of an occupation. Under international law, an occupation happens when the armed forces of one state exercise effective control over foreign territory. But here is the absolutely crucial part. This does not automatically transfer sovereignty. The territory legally still belongs to its original sovereign entity. It's like borrowing a car without asking. You might be in the driver's seat, but you don't suddenly own the vehicle. It's a temporary state of affairs, not a real estate acquisition.
And these rules, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. Starting way back with the Hague Regulations in 1907, and then later with the Fourth Geneva Convention in 1949, international law put incredibly strict duties on occupying powers. Basically, if a state controls a territory, they are legally burdened with protecting the civilians living there, maintaining public order, and respecting very specific human rights. It is a massive, heavy legal responsibility.
Section 3. The International Courts. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing exactly who oversees these rules. On the global stage, we're primarily looking at two distinct courts, and it's super vital to understand the difference between them. On one hand, we have the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ. The ICJ settles legal disputes between actual states. It issues advisory opinions, but it doesn't prosecute individual people. Then, on the other hand, we have the International Criminal Court, the ICC. The ICC does the exact opposite. It investigates and prosecutes individuals for specific, horrific atrocities. Think war crimes or genocide. So one deals with the responsibility of entire nations, and the other deals with the criminal responsibility of specific human beings.
But, the ICJ and the ICC aren't the only players in the game here. Domestic, national courts can actually get involved too. Depending on a country's specific national laws, their own domestic courts might hear cases involving major international crimes. This operates under something called the principle of universal jurisdiction. It's basically this idea that some crimes are just so universally egregious, so terrible, that literally any nation's courts can try the perpetrators, completely regardless of where the crime actually took place. So when examining an occupation, these international courts have some seriously impressive authority, at least on paper. They can interpret international law and firmly determine whether certain actions violate legal obligations. They can issue binding judgments, they can order reparations for victims, and especially in the case of the ICC, they can even issue formal arrest warrants. Pretty powerful stuff, right?
So the crucial point is, there is no global police force. The courts have all this significant legal authority to issue judgments and warrants, but they generally do not command military forces. They can't just dispatch an international SWAT team to enforce compliance. A judge can sign a warrant all day long, but they cannot force a powerful military to lay down its arms or withdraw from an occupied territory. Section 4. The Enforcement Problem. Which really makes you wonder, how do these rulings actually generate real-world action if judges don't have an army backing them up?
Well, because there is no global police force, actual compliance relies entirely on a really complex web of geopolitics. Think of it like an enforcement pie. If judges don't have military backing, enforcement demands serious political will.
intense diplomatic pressure, heavy economic sanctions, and total cooperation from national governments and international organizations. The court provides a legal mandate, for sure, but the actual enforcement, that is completely outsourced to the messy, complicated global stage. And because enforcement relies on all those political and diplomatic factors, there is this incredibly frustrating mismatch in speed. Legal rulings might take years and years to secure, and powerful states hold massive political influence that they can use to delay or dilute implementation. This means the pace of justice rarely, if ever, matches the slow, resistant grind of political reality on the ground. Section 5. Why court rulings matter. Because I know what you're probably thinking right now. If courts can't actually enforce their rulings, what is even the point of having them? If powerful states can just use politics to ignore these rulings, do they matter at all? The emphatic answer is yes, absolutely, but often in ways that are gradual rather than immediate. You have to think about the long-term impact here. Court decisions clarify international law for future generations. They create ironclad legal precedents. Even if a ruling is ignored today, it still influences future diplomatic negotiations. It actively supports global accountability efforts, and it fundamentally shapes public debate. They are absolutely essential for long-term accountability. And this brilliantly illustrates a key reality. Ending an occupation requires a massive, highly coordinated effort. We're talking diplomatic negotiations, binding political agreements, sustained international pressure, complex security arrangements, major shifts in public opinion, and legal compliance. The courts are just one single, albeit incredibly important, gear in a much larger geopolitical machine needed to actually resolve these territorial conflicts. This quote summarizes our entire explainer perfectly. International courts represent one of the world's most important attempts to uphold the rule of law beyond national borders. Look, they may not have their own armies, they might not always secure immediate compliance from powerful states, but they do something absolutely vital. They define the legal standards, they officially document alleged violations so they can't be denied, and they provide a truly necessary mechanism for truth. They hold the line for the rule of law in a very chaotic world. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative question to chew on. Does international law truly influence conflicts, or does raw political power ultimately decide what happens? The balance between justice and global power is incredibly delicate, and honestly, the answer might just depend on how willing the international community is to turn legal rulings into reality. Thank you so much for focusing in and learning with me today. Keep asking questions, keep examining the structure of our world,